Paul Giurata will give the next presentation, Life After Windows, 10 Ways User Experience Design Will Change. Paul Giurata is the managing partner of Catalyst and is considered one of the preeminent UI application architects in the US, with operating experience in diverse technology companies. Paul began his user experience career at Apple, working on media-rich learning environments for children.
Hi, I'm Paul Giurata from Catalyst Resources. I'm going to spend some time speaking with you today about how user experience will change after Windows. I'm going to talk about 10 separate ways. Catalyst is a user interface design and development firm. We've been around for a long time. We've designed about 500 different pieces of software. So we've seen a lot of different things, a lot of different trends that have taken place, and here are 10 that we think will be very prominent when operating systems start to decline. Now, just to level set, let's talk about what the operating system has provided users for the long haul. First, just to be clear, the operating system, the foundation of the operating system is it was the code that was controlling an Intel microprocessor that was controlling a machine of hardware and monitors and different functionality. So it was the assembly language that actually allowed the microprocessor to control the instrument. Along with that, it did computation. It was used for computation. It provided for storage on that machine. It over time provided network access. It was a place where our applications were accessible, and it became our workspace. And if it was a desktop, you sat in front of your desktop, and if for many of us, we walk around with these notebook computers, and if we have our notebook computer, then we can do work. If we don't have our notebook computer, we can't do work. So what happens as the operating system falls away and decreases? Well, it's not really a great loss, because I'm sure as all of you folks know who are sitting here listening to this, is that much of this functionality is going to go up into the cloud. Network access is there. You already access applications there. They may be installed on your device, on a phone or on a tablet, but there's connected through the cloud. The computation capability is in the cloud. You're no longer dependent upon having it on your device. Storage, again, can be in the cloud. And again, your personal workspace now becomes much more extended. For many of us, particularly if you've got younger kids, my daughter who just went away to school, her personal workspace for the most part is her phone, even though she's very proficient on a computer. And so what we're going to see is this notion of a personal workspace, which used to primarily be our main computer, is going to evolve, and it's going to be in the cloud. What you don't see happening, because you just don't need it, is the local hardware control. We don't care about that. It doesn't matter to us. As long as we can access the things up above, that's fine. So let's talk about 10 things that will take place when the operating systems decline. Whether it's the Windows operating system or the Mac operating system, they become less prominent. They'll still be there, but they're not as essential. So, first thing is users will expect solutions to be device agnostic. If this is a piece of software that manages an investment portfolio, and if you were within a couple years of retiring and you wanted to see how close you were to your goal and what happened in the market, wherever you are, whatever device you're on, you want to see it. If it's on a notebook, you want to see it. There may be some things you do on a desktop. There may be some things you do on a phone. You're probably going to want to be able to do anything on any of those devices. Normally, you might say, well, normally I sit down on Saturday morning and I look at my portfolio. But you may want to look at that on your smartphone if it's a day where the market has had some significant movement. Trading, you might say, well, normally I trade when it's quiet and I've got some quiet time. But if the market's very volatile, you see a great opportunity, you might want to place that trade on your phone. So people are going to become device agnostic. They want to access the solution they are using, whether it's managing their investments, paying their bills, scheduling travel, communicating with employees on whatever device they pick up. Second thing is solutions are going to cater to a much bigger connected constellation. Now, keep in mind what we have run into over the past couple decades. Well, you're not inside the firewall, so we can't communicate with you. Well, you aren't on. You don't have VPN access, and so no, we can't connect to other vendors because the vendors aren't on our particular network. So for a long time, much of what we had was on a computer. We were an island. Then when we did get connected, most of us were connected in enterprise-wide networks and heavy limitations going in and out of those networks. But with it being cloud-based, all of a sudden we're going to have a much broader constellation. And there will be this connected constellation that has a much greater ability to impact what we're dealing with. Just to give you an example here, shows somebody who's a patient. This might be a patient that is having a test done for a skin biopsy for cancer. And the primary care provider is involved, but because they're connected, now the secondary care provider could be involved, which could be an oncologist, a radiologist, a pathologist, and they might be in different locations, but they could all become part of this care team. The results are accessible in the cloud, so that they can access them. When the treatment plan is identified, if it involves things from the pharmacy, it's accessible. So all of a sudden, this barrier of firewalls goes down, and now we'll be able to sit back and say, from an experience viewpoint, what's the constellation of stakeholders and users that will provide the greatest amount of value in this particular situation. And you see some amazing capabilities when you start thinking of how you could extend medical care and improve the quality of medical care or life science type areas. Third thing, experience will be designed on the work patterns, not file edit view. You know, in our office, we have a business manager who has a Windows machine, and she uses Excel for a good portion of the day, and I use Excel on my Mac. And if she comes to my machine to use Excel, she has no way of finding her way around. She absolutely can't use it. If I go to her machine, I can't use it. Now it's the same piece of software. It does the same work. We both really know how to use that piece of software. However, the experience is so burdened with the conventions of the operating system that neither of us can access that. That will go away, and it will continue, and is declining now and will continue to decline. So that what people are going to be after is, what's the pattern of the work I need to do? And they're going to do that. And if you are invoicing and tracking accounts receivable, it doesn't matter what device you're on. The process will be prominent, not the file, edit, view menus as we've all come to see. And it has just always amazed me that how anything in the world could be put under a file, edit, view menu. It'll be nice to not have to be dealing with that. So these patterns of reusable patterns will become very prominent, and a pattern is just a collection of steps. Typically patterns have views are made up of panels, but they're very well defined. For example, making a travel reservation, all of us know what that pattern is, and we have it ingrained in us, and what we want to do is we want to do the work. And we want to get involved in that. We don't want to be encumbered by what the operating system is asking us to do, forcing us to do. Our workspaces will become portable. Sorry about that typo there. And let's hope they won't all be exactly like this, but this is portable. It is convenient. But the point is that we do have workspaces. And for the most part, our workspaces have really become these computers that we carry around. Some of us have, desks. We have desks, and we have paper and organization. But without our computers, we don't really have a workspace. And people will want them to be portable. And if they are in a mobile setting, that workspace may very well be their phone. If they're in the office, it may very well be a desktop. Experiences will be responsive, adaptive, and unified. Let's talk about this for a minute. So, what you're looking at is a piece of software that Catalyst designed that is for managing all of the systems and the maintenance on boats, and typically fairly significant boats. And as we all have heard, that boat owners have the two happiest days of a boat owner's life are the day he bought their boat and the day that they sold their boat. And that's because there's a lot to take care of. There's a lot you have to do. Well, the experience here is you may be planning a trip down to the British Virgin Islands, and you might be sitting at your desk in your home office and you're planning some things, making sure that you've got provisions, making sure that you've got maintenance. When you get on the boat, you want that same capability to be on your tablet, because you're not going to bring your desktop with you. You're going to bring a tablet with you. And that information needs to be stored there. You can be connected some of the time, but not all the time. Obviously, when you're out at sea, you're not going to be connected. When you go ashore, the things you need to do ashore, you may want to have on your phone so that you could carry it in there. So the experience is responsive across devices. Okay. Now, what do we mean by adaptive? By adaptive, we mean that think of the UI in terms of panels of functionality. So that set of blocks there, which are individual elements of the boat, pieces of equipment, you could see in one case it's 4 columns wide. Then when it goes to the tablet, it's 2 columns wide, and then it changes to 1 column. And that's a responsive behavior. By adaptive, what we mean in some cases the UI actually just changes when you get down to a certain form factor. And often it happens on smartphones when it gets down to that point. Then you just have to present the UI, but the functionality stays the same. And the last thing, it's unified. It's not like what I experienced with Excel on my Mac and Excel on my Business Manager's Windows machine. That is not a unified experience. It's anything but unified. In this case, regardless of where you go, the experience is not identical, but it's similar. You know you're in the same environment. You can access the same things. Now, you'll notice I'm not committing to a particular technology. And the reason is we think that's going to evolve a lot. In some cases, it may be HTML if you don't have to access a lot of native functionality. A lot of cases, you might have a web implementation and you might have a native implementation. In this case, the desktop version was web-based. The tablet version was native because you really needed to have that native storage and native capability. Same way with the phone. So the responsiveness, adaptive behavior, and unified are critical things that will be there, but that doesn't necessarily dictate a particular technology direction, and in fact the technology could still differ across it. What you do want to be able to do is to have a uniform design, leverage that design, and as much as possible leverage the content. There will be a mass exodus away from those Windows and thick client applications. And people will immediately say, I've got an application like this old Windows application. I don't want to change the underlying functionality, but I desperately need to move it to a web implementation. And that will take place. And many people have already done that. We're probably in the latter stage of that taking place. But the world of thick client applications is just going to be smaller and smaller, because people are going to say, you mean I have to do that on my Office CPU? I can't do it at home? You mean I have to VPN into the server into my office to do that? You mean it's on the licenses just on one machine? It just doesn't work any longer. It's just not the way we work. When we used to all go in the office, be there all day, and leave, that was a different situation. Now, many of us are distributed. Many people spend part of their day working at home, not working at home. We don't want to be strapped to a individual machine. And I will even tell you what's interesting here in Silicon Valley when we talk to people. There's a lot of talent in here, in Silicon Valley, obviously. They don't want to be working on those thick client applications. So one of the corollaries to this is that if you're somebody who's slow to move off those thick client applications, not to mention any names, then you're going to be finding that the talent you would like to attract will not be interested in working in that environment. Simplification will be the mantra. Why is that? Well, one big reason is it used to be when you had this operating system and you could install software, people bought the software. They already paid for it. If they didn't like it, that's okay. They already bought it. But in the world that we live in now, where the functionality will be cloud-based, where our personal workspaces will be cloud-based, much of the software, much of the solutions that we source will be as software as a service. We will pay a certain amount for it. And if it's not simple, we won't use it. When we decide we're not going to use it, we're going like, wow, why am I paying wait a minute, why am I paying $149? Wait a minute, why am I paying $339 a month for that? And people will stop using software that no longer is meaningful for them and productive. Aside from that, you are always subject to competitors coming in and saying, I have an easier way to do it. This is easier, this is faster, there's less learning time. So simplification will be an ongoing theme in user experience. And there are some particular techniques for doing that. One of them is to get crystal clear on where users spend the bulk of their time. And what we have found in most pieces of software, that users spend 80% of the time, 80% of the users spend their time in probably less than a dozen views in a piece of software. I know it sounds odd, but that's really how it is in many pieces of software. And if you could simplify those areas, then the software becomes much easier. The era of the giant apps will end. What's happened is that, and all you have to do is look at your phone and to realize this, is the world of software applications, the world of software solutions that we use are much more point solutions. We use something for expense reports. We use something for weather. We use something to book travel. We use something to do whatever. They're not these large comprehensive suites, like an integrated accounting package with the general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, vendor management, payroll management. There are fewer and fewer and fewer of those because that's not really the way people like to work. And another factor is, when there was a time period when people would buy a piece of software, and since they bought it, they wanted to use it. And they wanted to depreciate that. Well, the fact that they were going to have to depreciate that over the useful life, which probably was 3-4 years, it bought software companies some time. They're busy depreciating it. They aren't going to come back for something new. But now people are expecting, with this cloud-based stuff, that about every 90 to 180 days, they're expecting to see meaningful refinement coming out. And you could bet that your customers will be doing that. So you no longer have time to do 9 months of development, do code freeze, do 3 months of user acceptance testing and QA, and then put it on to production servers. It's got to be much faster. Consequently, the applications will just be smaller. And what's interesting about this is that, we probably talk to people and look at maybe we probably look at maybe 500 pieces of software a year. And lots of times we'll talk to people who will say, well, we have a really big piece of software. It's actually one big piece of software. It's got a bunch of modules, and we want to talk to you about doing the UI. And the reason why they want to talk about doing the UI is the software is so large, they have no way of moving it. And we see companies get stuck year after year after year, where they can't take these big, huge integrated systems and update them. Consequently, It's much better for people to have smaller applications that they could change, they could evolve on them, that might be grouped together in a personal workspace, but it's not going to be the world of SAP applications, or even something like QuickBooks will become. There will be a web-based version of QuickBooks and accounting systems, but they probably won't be as elaborate as they were, and they'll probably be more of a workspace for your financial management in your business, and you have a place where you invoice clients, you have a place where you pay vendors. It's more of that personal workspace that is tailored to that function. Okay, 3 more. Keen understanding of the true mobile activities. Now, if you look at this, you go, kind of looks like they're doing the same thing and either one on any of these 3 devices. In reality, this is a piece of software that we designed that allows healthcare providers, workers, to go into homes and evaluate and provide healthcare services and physical therapy to people that have recently come out of surgery. They might have had a hip replacement or a shoulder surgery or whatever. And so what really took place is that, for the most part, the evaluation of the patient was done with a tablet, which was a big improvement over having to do it with a touch-tone telephone and enter in everything from a touch-tone telephone, which was particularly problematic because that meant you had to get the patient close to the telephone. But for fraud prevention, the easiest way to tell if the person was at the patient's house was to make them do it from their telephone. So, but the reality of what happened, the experience here, is someone would do the evaluation with the tablet, and they wouldn't finish the write-up of the whole report. They just didn't have time to. It didn't make sense. They're trying to interact with the patient. They're trying to create a comforting patient experience. They don't want to collect a bunch of data and say, okay, do you mind if I sit here and write up things for 30 minutes? So the experience was to use the tablet to put as little between the provider and the patient, to be able to interact with it, to focus on the patient experience, to collect that information. And when you were done, then when you went back to the office, you would sit down at your desktop and you could go back to where you were. You wanted to have the same unified experience, but that would be where you would finish up the experience. So the true mobile activity was very, very specifically orchestrate the highest quality patient experience as you can. And you have 2 quote-unquote users. You have a healthcare provider and you have a patient, and they are both active participants in this software experience. This sort of thing of really understanding things very well will become more and more critical, especially when people have all these different devices. If you don't understand that mobile activities and mobile settings really well, then you'll see people putting all functionality on all devices, which simply doesn't work. And by the way, the reason why there was a smartphone, there were some cases where there were less involved evaluations which could be done more on a smartphone as opposed to a tablet. But in the more comprehensive evaluations where there was more data to be collected and more review of the person's physical condition, the tablet was the preferred device. Enhanced data will be part of the experience. Now, we go back to that portfolio management. So this is Bill's portfolio. He's got 4.5 million in there. His goal is 5 million by 2017. Not a bad deal, and to retire like that. And so he looks at Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola may have been down. But what it provides him with is to get a little more detail on Coca-Cola. He doesn't just say that it falls by 1%. He can say, well, they are planning $1 billion in cost cuts. Well, what does that mean? Well, their bottling plant is having to change over and can no longer use bromine because it's become touted as a very toxic chemical. So people want to be able to navigate to more data, and the part of the value that they get out of your solutions is the way you let them access related data and enhance data. And that is really part of the experience. So when a person sits down, just when you think about this, if this was your portfolio, aside from being pretty darn happy about your retirement situation, I would hope, that you no longer just look at those numbers. You come in and you say, well, I want to learn a little bit more about Coca-Cola. Well, let me find out what they're doing. Let me find out what some of the changes are. How do I feel about that? They draw their own conclusions about it, as opposed to just doing a financial review. This enhanced data will be a significant part of the experiences that we design going forward. Last is that we will be seeing people move toward and strive for a single infrastructure that serves multiple devices. They don't want to have an infrastructure for mobile and say, well, we've got an infrastructure for smartphones and tablets, and then we got an infrastructure for point of sale. And we're going to make the changes to the smartphones and tablets in Q1, and oops, we're going to make the changes in point of sale in Q3. That doesn't work well. People will want to have a single infrastructure, single data sources, a set of services that can provide that capability across any of the devices they need to access. What you're looking at here is you're looking at some software that is used to manage fuel ordering and distribution, manage the pricing of it, and it could be in a store, it could be in a hospital, in a mine. If it's in a store, you might have a point of sale. If you're a person who's standing outside and you're looking at, you've got 25 different locations, depots that you're going to that might be county depots with trucks and cars, you might use a tablet. If you're a person who is responsible for fuel that is a backup generator at a hospital and it's a storm, you might want to look at that on your smartphone. And if you need to order more fuel, you want to order it. And the way you order it, you want to order it just the same way you did on any of the other devices. And you know from on your tablet, if you grab that dot down at the bottom and drag it up, that will generate the order. You need to be able to do that. So you've got that same single infrastructure that can be evolved over time at the same rate. We will no longer be able to get away in a situation where we say we've got these independent things and we'll come out with the Windows version, and then later we'll come out with the Mac version, because the Windows people never talk to the Mac people. It doesn't matter, they'll be different. It's not going to work to say I'll come out with my point of sale solution and then the person also has a smartphone. If those two don't play together, it's not going to work. You won't be successful in the marketplace. So those are just 10 what I think are very positive, exciting developments and how user experience will change. Not so much as Windows dies, but as the operating systems decline in their critical role that they play in computing, and much of that functionality, which has historically been in operating systems, moves to being in the cloud. Again, I'm Paul Giurata from Catalyst Resources. And if you want to learn more, you can find us on our site at catalystresources.com. Take care.